Welcome to the Life on Purpose podcast, conversations that explore holistic health, intentional living, learning, and growing. I'm your host, Brandy Eilert. All right, welcome back to the Life on Purpose podcast, where today my guest is Elisabeth Kristof. Elisabeth is a certified neurology practitioner and founder of Brain-Based Wellness, which is, again, we were kind of talking a little bit beforehand. This is a totally new area for me. I have so many questions. And especially during a time kind of like this, where we're seeing all of these stresses on our nervous system. I can't talk to a person in a day that hasn't had some sort of effects of long-term stress. And I don't know kind of where all this started, and maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of insight into that. But I'm so grateful that you're here to talk about this. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation, and you're completely not alone. Most people have no idea what applied neurology is. And so just at the very basic level, applied neurology is taking the latest in brain science and breaking it down into really practical exercises, neural exercises that you can use to train your nervous system to be more resilient, to handle more stress, to resolve deficits that you have in your system, so that your brain and your nervous system don't drive you into protective outputs like pain, dizziness, migraine, fatigue. Even depression and binge eating can be outputs of a nervous system that's dysregulated. So that's simply what it is, a training practice for your nervous system.
Which I feel like, again, going back to what I was saying before, that so many of us can use these types of techniques, I think. I mean, me personally, in my own life, over stress was something that kind of got me into a health crisis, holding on to old traumas and, having the, I can handle it, I'm fine kind of mentality, to where, I started seeing physical health issues. For me, pain was one of those. So I can completely commiserate with, needing these techniques, especially in kind of the world that we're living in. So what kinds of, I guess, outputs are you seeing with most people that you work with?
So I think what a lot of us just aren't taught, but that's a really important thing to understand, is that we all have this really intelligent operating system inside of us. That's our nervous system. And it really drives all of our behavior and our lived experience of the world. And that system is always changing.
Yeah.
And it's always changing. That's neuroplasticity. And it's always changing in response to the stimulus that we give it. So we have some agency, whether we're moving that system in a positive direction or whether we're moving into unwanted outputs, like you were talking about, like pain. And so what I see right now in the world is we have all been under a period of chronic stress. There was a pandemic that comes with a lot of financial instability. It comes with concerns about our health, concerns about our loved ones, and a tremendous amount of change. There's also a lot of social change going on right now. Our lifestyle on a daily basis has changed, and change, period, is threatening to the brain and to the nervous system, because our brains function on pattern recognition to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And so our brain's primary purpose and our nervous system's primary purpose is always our survival. Right. And decisions that our nervous system makes, our nervous system takes in all of this different information from your eyes, from the balance system in your inner ear, from your body mapping system, from the nerves inside of your body that tell your brain what's going on in your organs and inside of you. And it integrates all of that information and it makes a decision and it generates an output. And the most important thing that it takes into account in generating that output is safe or unsafe. Am I going to keep you alive with this output? And too much stress for too long is dangerous. Stress is at the root of 95% of disease. It leads to inflammation in the body. It leads to autoimmune disorders. It leads to disease state that makes you primed for cancer and for mental health issues and addiction. So our brains and our nervous system know too much stress for too long is dangerous. It's taking in all this stimulus. It makes a decision. I need to reduce the stress. I need to reduce the threat and the stimulus coming in. So it's going to generate a protective output. And that output could look like anything from pain, which is going to get you to take smaller steps, reduce the intensity of your workout, interact with the world less, reduce stimulus, to migraine, get you to go lay down in your bed, pull the covers over your head, block out the light, and get less stimulus coming in. It could also look like an episode of binge eating, upregulating the parasympathetic rest and digest system to move you out of a state of chronic stress. It's called stress eating for a reason. We're reducing our stress physiologically when we move into that digestive state. And so the outputs that I see kind of range from all of those things: migraine, pain, dizziness, muscle weakness, binge eating, anxiety, depression. It's just about whatever our brain thinks is going to work best to get us to change our behavior, to reduce the amount of stress that we're experiencing, to stay safe.
That's really fascinating. As I was sitting there listening to you talk too, it seems so simple that your body is saying, hey, there's something going on here. And oftentimes we're inclined not to listen to it. There are many, clients that I work with in the coaching practice that I have, and another one that I work with also, where a lot of these women, I work primarily with women, are almost addicted to stress, don't know how to get out of that cycle of stress. And it almost feels uncomfortable not to be having those stimulus in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's a lot of hormones and chemicals that run through the body with that stress state: adrenaline, cortisol, all of these things that are happening all the time. And our body, it does in a lot of ways like to maintain homeostasis, and it gets used to these certain states. And then we will sometimes create them when we move out of them because we don't feel comfortable. Also, there's a lot of people in our society, we're often taught that it's not safe to experience our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times we use all of that doing and hustling and activity to keep us from experiencing those emotions that our body and our subconscious mind don't feel safe releasing, sitting with, being with, processing. And so that can be a distractive mechanism of the brain. It can be kind of a loop to keep you out of that. And it can also be because that's a state that your body has been bathed in those chemicals for so long, and it feels normal. And it's also just a huge part of our society, hustle culture and doing. And the problem is that eventually it does catch up to you, and it shows up in the body. It can't handle it for so long, and it does lead to disease. It leads to addiction. It leads to unwanted behaviors like binge eating or drinking a lot. These are all just tools that your brain is trying to use to get you to regulate.
Right.
Or it leads to chronic pain, chronic fatigue, autoimmune disorder, cancer, all kinds of things when we stay stuck in that high stress state. So it is really important to give ourselves the tools to be able to release some of that stress and feel safe doing so.
So because I love kind of the human part of all of this, I would love to hear kind of how you ended up in this kind of work. What's your story? What's your background to be so passionate and to be able to start a practice like this?
So I had a couple movement studios here in Austin. I was a Pilates practitioner, and we had a couple studios. And in 2015, we were starting a teacher training program, national teacher training program. And at the time, I knew enough about neuroscience to know that you don't have a tight hip flexor. You have a brain that's telling your hip flexor to maintain a certain amount of tension because it thinks that that's safe and that that's what you need. And so I knew that the future of movement science was also going to include brain science, and I really wanted to include that in our program. So I found an institute in Arizona called Z Health Education, and they teach applied neurology. They certify people in applied neurology. And I went and I fell in love with it. I started studying the nervous system all the time and really used it for many years for athletic performance and pain management. And then there came a time in my own life where everything fell apart. And I had to dissolve my partnership shares in that business that I'd had for 12 years. And that was my identity and my community. I was deep in workaholism. Even though I taught mindful movement practices, I was actually really dissociated from my body and really, really deep in workaholism. And so to lose the business was really scary for me. And then the very same week that I dissolved my partnership shares in the business, my romantic partner at the time that I lived with was diagnosed with a pretty severe and rare cancer around his heart. And I went into being a full-time caretaker for him. I was under a tremendous amount of stress, financial stress, health concerns. And in that high stress state, all of this unresolved childhood trauma just came flooding back. It just triggered into my body things that I had no idea about. And I started experiencing really severe outputs of my own nervous system. And my binge eating got really bad. I was in chronic pain. I had migraines. I would have dissociative episodes. And I had all of this background in understanding the nervous system and how it works. And I would see it happening in me before I would experience these outputs. I would notice signs of dysregulation that I looked for in my pain clients or that I looked for in my athletes before a binge, before a migraine. I started to see all these signals. And I also started to do a lot of research trying to understand what was going on in my partner's body at the time. Like, we were 39 years old. We were both sober for a long time, healthy people who exercised and worked out. Like, why did he have cancer? And he also had PTSD. And I started reading books like The Body Keeps the Score and Waking the Tiger, and understanding the relationship between nervous system dysregulation and disease. And then ended up going down a long rabbit hole of healing myself, working with different somatic practitioners, really understanding how to apply applied neurology, functional neurology, to myself and to behavior change and to trauma resolution. You know, the application of this system of training the nervous system is so much broader than just athletic performance. And so that is when I really started creating the work that I offer now through the virtual platform, Brain-Based Wellness. And now I really use this applied neurology or functional neurology foundation to do behavior change, to do trauma resolution, and specifically with disordered eating, because that's so much of what pushed my own education.
Right. And, you know, I guess listening to you talk, I think where I really like to go right now is kind of the trauma route, because how can you, when someone comes in and they want to do this work, do you find that there's this disconnect between getting them to really connect, you know, trauma, chronic stress to physical health issues? Do you find that it's hard to wrap, you know, their mind around a little bit? Like, what does that look like for me then? How am I supposed to resolve something that happened to me so long ago, or not so long ago even, but how am I supposed to deal with trauma? You know, do you find that that's something that is kind of hard for clients
it's
to really
hard for people to wrap their mind around, because we live in a paradigm that really teaches us that everything is so compartmentalized and that we have, you know, these different systems. And that's just not, I mean, we're one integrated being, right? We don't have like a brain and a body. It's all part of the same organism. And so the best way that I can help people usually see is by looking at the outputs that they're experiencing. So, like, are you binge eating, and what happens when you try to stop that? And a lot of times what happens is when people take their coping mechanism away without having the tools for regulation, they start to just experience a different protective output. I stopped binge eating and I started getting migraines. I stopped binging and I started experiencing pain. Or maybe you can move out of the migraines, but then you start developing something else, or the pain just migrates around. And then we can start to see, okay, you had this episode of binge eating, you had this migraine. What came before that? What happened in your body before that? What happened in your life before that? And can we start to look for patterns to see that certain triggers, certain situations, certain stresses lead to these outputs? And then it starts to become clearer. Hey, these things are happening because of my stress level. And where is that stress coming from? And how can we resolve it physiologically? So a lot of the times with trauma resolution, I don't necessarily want people to go back and relive their trauma cognitively. We're just processing it through the body and healing the deficits in the nervous system that occur because of it, so that they don't have to even cognitively revisit it. We're just changing the body and the system so they don't keep getting re-triggered and experiencing those same outputs. And then it also too, if they do want to work on their trauma in a cognitive way, I want to equip them with tools to regulate their nervous system before and after they do it. Because the thing with a lot of like talk therapy and cognitive frameworks is that is great and it's important, but if we're not careful to help the body process it and help the nervous system regulate around it, we end up re-traumatizing ourselves by going back there without having the tools to regulate around revisiting that experience. So if you want to do emotional processing or you want to do talk therapy, maybe there are some really practical neural exercises you can do before your therapy session and after your therapy session to help you regulate your nervous system so that you don't move into those protective outputs afterwards, and you can do the work without experiencing the shutdown and the protection that comes from it without it.
So, one has to wonder then if doing kind of the work, the practical work, body work that you offer might be something you would do in prep before doing kind of the cognitive work. It would sound less scary, I think, for people, because nobody wants to revisit all the horrible things that maybe happened to them. That is kind of intimidating and may even hinder someone wanting to get better, because that's hard. That's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I don't even know that we always have to. Sometimes we do, right? Sometimes there's these fragments of ourselves that we need to go back and reclaim and heal and be with and accept and integrate into ourselves. But sometimes it can be as simple as just following the trigger. I get triggered. I experience the signals that I'm moving into threat. So how do I start to learn threat signals? Does my mouth dry out? Right? Because part of our digestive process is saliva production. And so if my mouth dries out, that's a signal that I'm moving out of my parasympathetic nervous system, my rest and digest system, into my sympathetic fight and flight freeze system, right? So into my arousal system. So if my mouth dries out, that's a good sign I'm moving into dysregulation. If I start to experience a lot of tension in my shoulders or tension in the muscles around my eyes, that's part of a reflexive protective posture, startle reflex. And so if I start to experience that, I'm moving into a little bit of threat response. If my palms start sweating or my heart starts beating, or I can't take a full breath in and a nice relaxed exhale. So, or maybe I start to experience a little bit of pain at the site of an old injury that's not acutely injured anymore. That's also a signal from my nervous system. Hey, you're under too much stress right now. So can I just start to recognize those little signals and then do really practical neural exercises that give my system stimulus that it needs? They take 3 to 5 minutes, and start to regulate my system in response to those triggers so that I don't keep getting triggered by that same thing. And maybe that's all I have to do. Maybe I can just keep reconditioning my body to have a different response to an old trigger, and that will allow it to process. And then there's times where I have to go deeper and look at the subconscious mind and look at the emotions. But the very first, most important thing is always to create safety in the body first, so that we have a safe container to do all that other work.
So let's walk me through your process. Let's start with binge eating. So you have somebody who, their output is binge eating, because this is kind of, a really personal area for you. What does that process look like from start to finish for a client that comes to work with you?
So for that issue specifically, I have a program called Food Freedom. And what we do is first we start with the applied neurology to create safety in the body. So that looks like learning a lot of different neural exercises or neuro drills that stimulate the vagus nerve. That's a really important nerve for people who have disordered eating, who have PTSD, who have anxiety, because the vagus nerve, it's one of our cranial nerves, goes from our brainstem all the way down into our pelvis. And it is the nerve that gives the signals from your brain or from your body up to your brain that tells your brain what's going on inside of your body. And it also is a key player in your parasympathetic, your rest and digest, calm and respond system.
Yeah.
When we're under too much stress for too long, our vagus nerve can get damaged by the adrenaline and the cortisol that's pumping out all of the time. And then our brain doesn't get a very clear signal from our body about what's happening inside. And so we lose a really important skill called interoception. Interoception is awareness of what's going on in your body. And we also, not only are we not aware of the signals our body is sending us, but we don't interpret them accurately. And we start to perceive too much threat where there isn't any. So you might like wake up in a panic, even though it's just the same day over and over again. It's just, I'm just going to do the work that I did the day before and live my normal life. Why am I waking up feeling like there's someone chasing me? That's an interoceptive issue. I'm interpreting too much threat inside of my body where there actually isn't any. And so working with the vagus nerve is really, really important in healing that, and also being able to start to reconnect to our body, to come out of dissociation, to feel our body's signals.
So what does that look like, the vagus nerve work? How do you heal something like that?
So there's a lot of different exercises that we do, but a really simple one that people could practice right now if they want to is moving the tongue. The vagus nerve innervates the tongue. And when we move our tongue in big ranges of motion, the vagus nerve gets more activity. The more stimulus something gets, the more myelinated the nerve becomes, the better conductivity you have. And so when you're doing applied neurology, one of the most important things to think about is to always assess and reassess each exercise, because everybody's nervous system is different.
Right.
And you have to become the expert of your own nervous system and know whether something's moving you in a positive or negative direction. So I would have somebody just do a quick assessment. It could be, how much saliva is in my mouth? Is it dry, or is it, am I pretty calm? There's a decent amount of saliva in my mouth. And you could also test your range of motion. Maybe just turn your head side to side, see how far you can see out of the corner of your eye, and then maybe rate any tension or pain you have on a scale of 1 to 10. And then we're just going to take our tongue over our teeth and behind your lips and make some big circles with the tongue. So you're going to try to go a little bit further back with each circle, and just think about kind of tracing over your teeth. Keep breathing in and out through your nose, 5 circles in one direction, 5 circles in the other direction, and then pause, take a breath in, take a nice long slow exhale, let that kind of integrate into the system. And then reassess. Notice if you have more range of motion in your neck. Notice if you have more saliva in your mouth. Notice if your muscles relax a little bit more, if your tension goes down. And if so, that's a positive drill for your vagus nerve, and something that you can do very quickly in a moment of stress to help your body re-regulate, to help your body move out of sympathetic response into a parasympathetic state. We also do a lot of drills that decompress the vagus nerve. A lot of times it gets impinged, especially because certain fibers run horizontally that get tightened up, our diaphragm, our pelvic floor, and these can compress the vagus nerve, and then it's harder to send the signal. So if we can unimpinge the nerve, then you get, again, better conductivity, better signals. There's vagus nerve resets, and then there's the normal things you hear about, like gargling water or taking a cold shower. So you can just play with all these different kinds of things to learn how your body and your system respond to them. And then just always make sure to assess and reassess. So that's where we start, with a lot of training for the vagus nerve, a lot of training for the respiration. We take about 20,000 breaths a day. So if we can make each breath more efficient and less threatening to the nervous system, then you're really reducing the stress level overall. We do vision training, we do body mapping, all kinds of really practical things to make the nervous system safer. So that's where we start. We start by creating a foundation of safety, and then we move on to emotional processing and how to process emotions, not just cognitively, but through the body, using somatic practices or tapping or combining neuro drills with processing the emotions. And then finally, we take a dive into the subconscious mind and look at the core beliefs that are keeping us in those behaviors, the beliefs that, our brain has taken on in order to keep us safe. And so it can be really threatening to try to move out of those subconscious patterns. So again, just like everything else, we start to try to rewire the pattern and take contrary action, but we are doing a lot of regulating the nervous system around that so that you don't push yourself into threat response by trying to change your behavior and change those deep beliefs that have been with you your whole life to keep you safe.
Right. And that's such a intimidating thought, I think, for some people, because, when you were talking, I was kind of visualizing, you kind of go into this cave and it's protective and you're asking me to now come out and there's all these scary things out there. How am I going to handle that? From a very like primal sense of safety.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's scary.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if somebody is in, and we touched on this just a little bit, but if somebody is in crisis mode, say their body is reacting with panic attacks per se. And again, it's a situation where it kind of comes out of nowhere. I don't know why this is happening. There's not anything in particular that's coming at me or that I should be stressed about. Most people want these practical tools of, okay, I just need to get out of this. I just need to get out of this panic mode. Would you recommend kind of those vagus nerve exercises, or are there other exercises that get somebody out of that immediate stress response?
Yeah, vagus nerve exercises are great. For panic, often respiration exercises are really good. So even if you can just slow your exhales down, it's going to send a signal from your body up to your brain that you're not under threat. And if you're hyperventilating, you're sending a signal that you are, that there's something to be scared about, that there's some kind of threat coming. And so even if you can just take a breath in through your nose, purse your lips like you're breathing out of a straw, so you have a little resistance for your exhale, and try to make your exhalation twice as long as your inhalation. And fMRIs have showed that as few as 6 of those breaths will actually help us start to really upregulate our parasympathetic system and move out of our fight, flight, and freeze response. So if in the moment of panic, you can just stop and take at least 6 of those breaths, or maybe do some box breathing, or sometimes I have people actually breathe into a bag like how you see in the movies, but it actually does help because it changes the CO2 level in the blood and it starts to help your body feel more relaxed. So there's really practical things you can do like that in the moment of panic. And then what I want people to start to learn is how to read the more softer, subtle signals that they're moving into threat before they get to the panic attack, before they get to the binge, before they have the migraine. And this takes a little bit of time because we are often pretty dissociated from our body. And so sometimes you're just going to push yourself into the place. And then you just have to have compassion with yourself and understand, like, this is just my brain and my nervous system trying to protect me. I'm just going to write it out. I have the binge, I have the panic attack, I have the migraine. And then after that, can I look back and see what were the signals that my body was sending to me before that happened? Did I experience pain anywhere? Did I feel tightness? Did I feel a sense of heaviness? Did I start to get a little bit of brain fog? Did my mouth dry out? Any kind of visual issue? What are the ways that your body communicates to you before you're already way up in that state. And then the more we can become aware of that and then interrupt it by doing something that helps our nervous system and that helps our body feel safe again, the better we get at moving out of that protective response. So if even just 50% of the time I can interrupt that loop, then I'm going to get better and better and better at interrupting the loop. It's going to get easier to do it. And eventually the behavior will happen every so often, and then a little further out, and then eventually not at all.
So the idea is retraining, I guess, retraining your body how to react to stress. I mean, that obviously takes some work and some forethought. Do you find that eventually you're not really thinking about doing it? It just becomes a habit of kind of interrupting these processes?
Yeah. So there's two ways that we use the functional neurology on the site. One is to interrupt the pattern, interrupt the loop of the protective response and start to find those little signals and regulate ourselves in the moment of stress. And the other one is just a daily practice of training the nervous system to heal your deficits so that all of those systems are functioning better all of the time, and you're creating a new baseline level of threat for your nervous system. And again, this doesn't have to be like an hour a day. It can be like 10 minutes, 5 minutes a day of training your nervous system, just like you would train your muscles in the gym. It's just training a different part of the system. And so most of my clients work on a daily practice of training their eyes, training the balance system in their inner ear, training their body mapping system, all of these different input systems that give information to your brain. And then as the quality of the information coming into your brain from these systems improves, when your visual system improves, all of this information is clearer and your brain can make more accurate predictions, your stress level all of the time, baseline, is way reduced because your brain feels safer doing its primary job, which is making predictions to keep you alive. And so if you think of your nervous system as a bucket, all of your life stress goes into the bucket. Exercise is a stress, relational stress, financial stress, the stress of a pandemic, but also all of the stress of each of your unique deficits in your nervous system. Any visual issue you have, any body mapping issue, an old injury that wasn't properly rehabbed. So your brain's map of where your body is in space is a little bit blurry all of the time. Every step you take is a little threatening, every breath. And so in that bucket, the stress level is the water, and it's just rising and rising and rising. And our brains and our nervous systems are intelligent, and they know that too much stress for too long is dangerous. So when that water level gets way up here, protective outputs start happening. So if we can heal the deficits, the water level is lower all of the time. And then you can handle more stress in life. You can handle the stress of growing your business or living through a pandemic or having a complex relationship without experiencing those same protective outputs because the baseline level of stress is lower.
I think that's such a smart, like you put it so nicely and you just lay it out so intelligently that it's hard not to be like, oh yeah, that's what was happening to me during, these big events. That pain was for a reason. So let's talk about, and this is of interest particular to me selfishly, the eyesight and kind of the inner ear balance. So I personally have the issue of not being able to handle too much stress. My body reacts very negatively. I have, autoimmune issues on top of it. My priority over the last few years has been managing stress. But one of those issues that I noticed very early on was a change in vision. And sometimes it's worse than others. And it is very directly related to stress. So you talked about kind of training the eyes. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, First of all, good for you for recognizing that that's an output that's related to stress. And it's very common, actually. If you are noticing that your vision is worse one day or you get any kind of visual disturbance, is a definite signal from your brain that you're under too much stress. And it's trying to get you to cut some of that out.
Yeah.
And so our visual system is at the top of our neural hierarchy, and that sounds complicated, but all that means is that your brain thinks the information coming from your eyes is really important to make predictions, really relies on that information.
Mm-hmm.
So the health of this system is very important to our brain's overall sense of safety. And our visual system, like every other system in the body, is always changing and it's always responding to the stimulus that we give it. And so everything is a skill and every skill is trainable, but we don't use our visual system in a lot of the ways that it's meant to be used because we're looking at a computer screen for most of the day, which is a constant 13 to 17 inches away from our face. So we have this one focal point for a long time during the day. We don't look far away off in the distance. We don't move our eyes through their full range of motion. We're not looking at things that are moving toward us and away from us. And so all of these are skills that our visual system should be good at. Our peripheral vision, we need to be able to take in information from the periphery, but we don't do it. And our brains are wired for efficiency. And so if we don't use something regularly, we start to lose that skill because it's not efficient to maintain those pathways.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do is we train all of the different visual skills intentionally. And then we find what ranges of motion of the eye are threatening to your nervous system. Do you move into threat every time you look up and to the left? And if so, that's a problem. We need to rehab that so that every time you look up and to the left, you're not sending yourself into a stress state. And so we look for what things stress your system out and also what skills are you deficient in. And then we start to train those skills and we start to move your eyes in those ways while we're also calming the nervous system so that you don't get that same, maybe you're doing a vagus drill while you're holding your eyes looking up and to the left. So you're creating a new physiological response to that movement of the eyes. And over time, you will actually improve your vision. I have many clients that I train out of wearing glasses. I have clients that are in their 70s and 80s that are able to drive again at night because they train their visual system. And that's super cool. But also what's great about it is that as the visual system improves, that makes a huge difference in the overall stress that you're under a lot of the time, just by healing these deficits that come just from the way that we live our lives, from the way our society is set up.
Right. And I think that's a point that I kind of wanted to cover today. My biggest questions when it comes to, all of the health crises that we find ourselves in, all of the explosion of chronic health issues, nervous system issues, stress, all of this. My question always is why? Where's it coming from? How did we get here? What are the reasons? And while that is a very complicated question, I'm completely aware. I still that's still where I go. And I like to kind of explore the possibilities. Where did this explosion of kind of nervous system overstress start? And I have a feeling I know the answer because I also have theories about it. Is our overuse of technology one of those?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that there's a lot of things about the way that we live that our animal bodies and our nervous systems are not equipped to live. It's like we're animals in the zoo, and you see the animals in the zoo that start pacing back and forth. That's a nervous system. That's a fried nervous system. And we're human beings. We're animals too. And we're made to move. We're made for a lot of social interaction. We're made to move our eyes through all kinds of ranges of motions. We're made to move our bodies. We're made to be out in nature. And we just don't get a lot of that. We are missing a lot of key components of what makes a healthy and optimal nervous system.
Mhm.
And so a lot of what I do is just helping to combat the ways that our society dysregulates us through lack of social connection, through lack of movement,
Yeah.
and sedentary lifestyle, all kinds of things. And definitely, definitely technology as well. And so I think that there's also the component. I mean, I think it's important to look at our health in terms of our physical body, like our nervous system, also our emotional body, our energetic body, and our spiritual body. And how do these can we get all of these in alignment with optimal health? Because I think disease really comes from issues with all of them. And in addition to the really physiological ways that our society dysregulates us, we also live in a society that does not like the expression of emotions. And many of us are taught at an early age, it's not safe. I'll be punished. I'll be isolated. I'll be abandoned. Maybe my caretaker was really angry and I don't want to be like that. And so we are from that developmental time of the age of 0 to 7, it gets really baked in that we cannot express these emotions. And there is a huge physiological component to emotions. They're meant to be expressed through the body, through tears, through laughter, through shaking, through screaming, through moving your arms and legs around. And we don't do that. And so that also is really dysregulating for the nervous system and leads to a lot of internalized stress in the body, in the terms of the emotional body as well.
Yeah. And there is no better human on the planet that can do all of those things and express them very well than a toddler. I've
That's right.
seen it every day.
Totally. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, it's fascinating to watch little people be able to express these like really big emotions and then be done with it. You know what I mean? Like just watch them kind of like purge all of this stuff and then go on and, about their day and like nothing happened.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we can learn a lesson from
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because you can see too how big the energy behind that is.
Yeah.
And then how it moves through them and they can let it go. And then we really civilize ourselves out of this inherent skill that we have to process that big energy of emotions. And that it's pretty harmful to the body.
Yeah, absolutely. So something that's kind of personal to me, I live in an athletic world. My husband works in college basketball. We see athletes, as a part of our daily life, and you, as a part of what you do, I don't know currently, but you have in the past worked with athletes. What kinds of nervous system issues are within that community that you are working with, and what does that look like?
Well, whenever I'm doing nervous system work with an athlete, we look at all the different input systems, and they still will often have deficits in their visual system or their balance system or something like that, especially if they are in a sport where, injury to the head is common, or they just have a lot of physical injuries that don't really get rehabbed at the level of the nervous system. And so chronic pain, you see a lot, limitations in range of motion. And just by doing some exercises that help kind of stack together a bunch of different stimulus for all these different input systems, their vestibular system, that's the balance system in the inner ear, the eyes, the respiration, they will be able to move with a lot more strength, have better range of motion, and most importantly, get out of chronic pain, because, athletes, they put a lot of wear and tear on the body, and that's okay if we take the time to rehab the nervous system, recreate the body map, heal the injury, and create safety in the body again, so that they don't have to keep experiencing the pain.
You know what I find really interesting is that that's kind of a world where a lot of these practices are readily accepted, whereas maybe, more mainstream, it's, for somebody like the average everyday person would be like, yeah, that's kind of, I'm not really going to go do something like that. That sounds crazy. But I love that kind of within that athletic world that, they're the ones that are kind of trying these more cutting edge techniques to heal, because they are, I mean, they treat their bodies like machines, and, they need a little extra TLC in that department.
That's right. It's because their body is so valuable. to
Right.
them, right? They prioritize so much the performance and the capability of their body. And one of the things that the institute that I train with in applied neurology always says is treat everyone like an athlete. Like, we're all the athletes of our lives. We
Yeah.
want to perform at our best ability. And in order to do that, we also have to train the nervous system. But yeah, absolutely. Athletes are always the most compliant clients because
Yeah.
they have such a high motivation to keep their body functioning really well because their livelihood depends on it. And it's a little bit harder to find that um,
Drive.
same kind of motivation
Yeah.
for other folks.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. So, I love to hear, especially with people like you that do this kind of work. I love to hear some of your most poignant kind of success stories, some big like great moments with clients that you've had that have seen some really great results.
I always love getting people out of pain. And I've had a lot of clients that, have been living their life going through cycles of over exhaustion and then burnout and crash with fatigue, with a migraine, with chronic pain, especially migraine. And being able to see these people like do the big things, grow their business,
Yeah.
have another baby, advance their career, put themselves out into the world and speak publicly and not get shut down by pain, by a migraine, and really be able to enjoy the things that they're working for is so exciting to see. But I think my absolute favorite thing is working with the people in food freedom, and just like these little moments where they'll reach out to me and say like, I went to the beach and I swam in the water and I felt joy. Like, I wasn't thinking about what everyone was thinking about me. I was able to like feel the sun on my face, feel the water around me. And I just started laughing like a little kid because
Mhm.
they're moving out of these oppressive paradigms, out of this culture that is really straight up abusive to people who are in bigger bodies, and able to come back to their own body and feel their senses and repattern those beliefs. And the freedom that they get to experience is it's just my favorite. It's my favorite thing.
I think the most tragic um, thing that people go through, especially with chronic stress or chronic health issues, or kind of the binge eating or the body image issues or whatever it is the lack of joy. So, you saying that it's kind of a poignant thing to think something as simple as feeling joy is a marker for success, basically. And I think you forget that we are so hard on ourselves. We're so hard on ourselves, and something just so poignant and simple as joy, being able to feel joy again
Yeah,
is
I mean,
fantastic, is a huge one.
it's like, why do all of this if we can't experience the pleasure and the joy of it? If like at the root of it, am I not doing everything to receive love and to give love,
Yeah.
And so doing this work and healing my trauma and coming back to my body and creating a foundation of safety, like now I'm able to give and receive love and
Right.
experience joy and experience all of my emotions and live this big, beautiful human experience,
Right.
not dissociated from myself, not shut down with pain, not shut down in a binge eating episode, and really be alive and present for all of it.
And that's the whole point, right? That's the whole point.
To me, it is for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for anybody who maybe wants to learn a little bit more about you and what you do, and all the great work, where can people find you?
The best place to find me is on my website, which is brain-based-wellness.com. And you can actually get a free video series there that'll teach you 5 super simple neural exercises to reduce stress, resolve anxiety, and just in that moment, help your nervous system regulate. And it'll teach you too a little bit about how to assess and reassess what works for your nervous system. It's totally free. And then people can just see how it feels in their body and reach out to me if you have any questions.
It's fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Elisabeth, thank you so much for coming on and letting
Thank
me
you.
pick your brain on all of this. I know it's probably, very basic questions, but for me, this is very fascinating. And it was something again that I didn't know a whole lot about. And now I feel like I want to dive right in and learn as much as possible, not only for myself, but the clients that I work with too, because again, like you said, it's all connected. So again,
Yeah,
I'm so grateful.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It was an honor.
Thank you.